outer parapet took the most damage over the last 20 or 30 years from people sitting on the walls, standing on the walls, climbing on the walls. If you go up there, you see there's an awful lot of repair work that's been done. But it's all part of trying to keep the Castillo around for a good long period of time, because not a lot of people know we're here, nor do they know Spain's part of America's history. Because if they did, my brother up in Virginia wouldn't be insisting that America started at Jamestown 400 years ago. When in my mind, the reality is it started here, and we have this little war going back and forth. My mother calls it the war of t-shirts, because he keeps buying Jamestown t-shirts and sending them to me. I'm a little bit more creative. I have a friend of mine that runs a silkscreen company, and I have custom t-shirts made. Like I had one made that said basically, you do the math, 1565, 1607, figure it out. The latest one I sent to him, and I sent a couple of friends of mine that work at Jamestown that basically said, at least we didn't have to dig in the ground to find our fort. It's still here. I walk in it every day. But other than that, folks, we'd like to see the fort stay as long as it can. Go ahead and tell the rest of that story, because, as I said, not a lot of people know that in a lot of ways America, in my mind, and other people's minds, started right here. Nobody lives in Jamestown anymore, but they still live in our community. We're still a thriving, growing community. Now, don't get to do this too often, but do you guys have any questions about the fort? Anything you might have heard about the fort, seen about the fort, or thought about the fort? Going once? Going twice?
How is this fort similar to other forts that Spain built? Because we just were in Puerto Rico and San Juan, and we saw a fort.
Real simple reason for that, ma'am. They sent all their combat engineers to the same school that originally had been started by the Torcelli brothers in northern Italy. So they all went through that school, they all saw the same models, they all saw the same ink drawings, they all got the same books. So they all got the same influence, which is why our garritas look just like the garritas they have down there. Everything else is pretty much along the same lines. Then you had a gentleman by the name of Vauban, who was Louis XIV's combat engineer, and he basically standardized everything. It all just set in stone after he touched it, because he brought math and geometry to the application of warfare. And from that, everybody else just said, you can't improve on that, so they just copied it. Anybody else?
I think at some point somebody told me that the walls would just swallow up a cannonball.
Well, sir, that's one of the nice things about our fort. Our fort, okay, let's put it this way. Have you ever seen the front end of your car after an accident? I know it's a horrible thing. You see all that styrofoam in there? Well, guess what? That styrofoam is there. It's going to crush down when you get in that impact. It's going to kill the energy. Well, guess what? We got nature's styrofoam all around us here in this fort. It'll accept that impact. It'll crush down because it's got all the dead airspace in it, so it can crush down and accept the impact. Now, the only difference is the tour guides in town, I have a love-hate relationship with them. They love to tell you guys great stories, and I hate to be the guy that's paid to tell you the truth. But they love to tell the story about how during that 1702 siege, the English would fire at the fort, cannonballs that hit the wall, either lodge in the wall and stay there, or they dent the wall, bounce off, and drop in the dry moat. And then at night, the Spanish would go out, collect all the cannonballs, bring them back in, and so the next day they would fire the cannonballs back to the English, and there's your first recycling program in America. Great story. But the reality of it is, I have a 4-pound cannonball that I actually fired out of a cannon, went 150 yards downrange, hit a plywood target, then went another 200 yards and hit a sandhill. And when it was all over with, I went down there and dug that cannonball up. And just from hitting plywood and sand, that cannonball's perfectly flat on one side. Not only that, but when we went ahead and tried to put it back in the gun, it only went maybe just a little bit back in the gun because it was so badly deformed and mushroomed. Now my father, in his infinite wisdom, went ahead and said, well, why couldn't you put that 4-pound ball in a 6-pound gun? At which point I said, well, Dad, I might be able to get it in, but I can't guarantee I'll get it out because it's out a true round. When I fire it, if it rotates and locks up, I just made a pipe bomb, which we call a really bad day in the artillery. And they found that out here in 1702. They had a gun blow up in this Western Bastion here on the second day of that battle. The explosion was so horrific, it killed 3 of the 4-man gun crew around it, wounded 6 others, and had such force it blew the front 4 feet of the gun off the top of the fort and buried it in the hill around the fortification so deep they didn't find it until the 1960s when they were putting a new water main in. And we have it right here in this room here.
Wow.
So these are not toys that the guys were dealing with in those days. I keep telling people that, and they keep getting hurt. But, what can you do? Anybody else got any questions?
So the cannonballs would just smack the wall and flatten pretty much.
Yeah, it's really that way, sir, with just about anything, because you get any mass of metal up to a certain velocity and it hits something else, it becomes what's called superplastic and it deforms radically in all sorts of strange ways.
Them and melted it and stuff.
Well, you need about 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit sustained to go ahead and melt those things. You couldn't do that here, but we do have cases of shipwrecks or small ship's boats that went down that were using old cannonballs for ballast or things like that.
Yeah.
Sir?
Is there any story that goes with that flag? It's kind of unique.
That flag, sir, is the cross of the House of Burgundy. And yes, it is Burgundy is the French. What happened was Philip of Burgundy married Juana, the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella. And when Ferdinand and Isabella passed on, Juana was supposed to ascend to the throne, but they also called Juana the Mad, or Juana la Loca. As my grandfather used to say, she was a couple McNuggets short of a Happy Meal. So she couldn't ascend to the throne and actually lead the empire properly, so her husband took on the role, even though he was a Frenchman. And he was a little bit worried because he was not a Spanish national, that he wouldn't be followed by the military. So the army, to ensure him that, yep, we like you, they started carrying his flag, family flag, into battle as early as 1506. What ends up happening not too long after that, the Navy adopts it. By 1520, it's become the flag of the Spanish Empire. That's the flag that the Spanish are carrying when they're fighting against the Dutch rebellion in Flanders. And ultimately, though, that flag is the flag of the Spanish Empire all the way up until 1785, when it changes to the one that we're more familiar with, the red, gold, red. Anybody else? Guys, I've been here for 15 years. My boss calls me the keeper of useless ephemera. If you got the question, I probably got the answer.
Thank you very much.
Oh, okay, well, guys, you're very welcome, but let me just say this. We've got a movie on the history of the fort down here. It actually really centers on the guns, the cannons, and the muskets. Shows what's going on in the weapons. It's 17 minutes long. It runs on a continuous loop. If you do want to see that, please feel free to go and do that. If you get in there late, don't worry, it'll start all over again. We will be cutting that off at about 5:10 or so we can start locking the fort down. The ticket that got you today, good for the next 6 days. Should you choose to return, please feel free to come back. We'd be glad to have you. But also, we start shooting cannons tomorrow, 10:30 in the morning. We go 10:30, 11:30, 1:30, 2:30, and 3:30. Please feel free to come back and see that. But the big thing I do have to tell you, which is more for you guys than it is for me, well, it kind of cuts both ways since I'm the only EMT on duty today. This fort was built to hurt people. Seems kind of obvious, I know, but it still likes to do it today, especially upstairs. No handrails, no guardrails. It's 33 feet to the ground below. Folks, I guarantee you, if you fall, you will get hurt. Most people think, oh, it's not a big deal. It cants out. I'll just slide down the wall. That's like sliding down a cheese grater. Okay? I'm just going to put it that way. I've had to clean up 1 or 2 people that did that. It wasn't pretty. I don't want to go ahead and have to do that with any of y'all. You seem like nice folks, so please, be very careful out there. Other than that, if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask me or one of the other rangers that, well, aren't here today because they all left me. But, no, they all had other things to do or were sick today. But I do have a couple of volunteers around here that work with me. They're very knowledgeable folks. Or you can always email us. We're always here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.